And good morning from our Boston Regional Training Center here in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm Matt Schwegler along with Jason Gagnon for today's tutorial on the basics of FLIR Thermal Studio.
All right, thanks Matt. Welcome everybody. Our session today is going to focus on the Thermal Studio software, which is relatively new, probably within the last 6 months or so. It is FLIR's latest advanced software for processing images and radiometric sequences, MPEG videos, and creating inspection reports. And there are what I would consider to be 5 key features of the software that I'm going to highlight today. Analyze the thermal images from your camera, radiometric images, which means that you can measure temperatures and you can process the images. You can also process radiometric sequences. We've had this SEQ format around for a while. With Tools Plus, you could record on the PC. With Researcher, now some of the cameras have the ability to record in the camera. It's called a CSQ file. So the Thermal Studio allows you to process those images, or those recordings. You can also edit and play MPEG videos from cameras like a GF320, T540, E95. You can create custom templates and inspection reports. And you can create batch jobs. And this is new to Thermal Studio, somewhat unique. I'll expand upon these in a bit, but before that I just want to talk in a more general sense about the software. This is a standalone program. There's no dependence on Microsoft Office for creating templates and reports. There is a demo version available. The demo version is not time limited, but it does show watermark on thermal images. The reports can be exported to PDF and XPS formats. There is online and offline license activation, and it can be downloaded from this link you see on the PowerPoint. It's support.flir.com/thermal studio. And there's also a manual there for download. Okay. The user interface is divided up into 4 different tabs. The Home tab contains links to some common functions and settings. The Library tab is where you can access all your folders, where you can find your images and find your videos for editing. The Reporting tab is where you can create templates and edit your reports. And the Batch Processing tab is where you can create those batch jobs. So the tabs sort of group these functions, it kind of groups the common functions. Now, one important thing on the Home tab is the Settings button. And this provides access to some really important settings, one being your regional settings. So here you can set your preferred language and your preferred units, and the software currently supports 22 languages. The Output tab allows you to set the output path for your batch processes. Also on the Settings button is the Overlay tab. Now this is unique to Thermal Studio. This allows you to control what shows on the JPEG overlay, the color portion of the JPEG that you view in Windows. So you have a lot of control over this now with Thermal Studio. We never really had that before. This doesn't impact the radiometric image, the data portion of the image. It only impacts what you see on that color portion of the image. So, for example, the image on the left is set to show the measurements table, the scale, and the logo, which you can see here. The example on the right is set to only show the measurements. So we've disabled the logo, the table, which is shown here, and the scale on the left. So that's just an example of some of the control that you have over this. So now back to the key features. One of the most important is the ability to analyze your images and measure temperatures. So you have a variety of tools available to you. Things like the spot meter and the line and the rectangle and the ellipse, and the delta T. They're very common. We have these in FLIR tools. What we don't have in FLIR tools is the polygon and the magic wand. Now the polygon is basically just a custom area where you can trace a shape. Functionally, it's the same as a rectangle, just a unique shape. The magic wand allows you to just click on a region on the image, and based on a tolerance that you can control, it will set temperatures or select temperatures all within that tolerance. So it's sort of like an auto area that after it's selected, you can adjust the size, and you can also tweak that tolerance. So that's kind of new. You can change your palette, and you can adjust the color distribution. Most of the handheld cameras will use histogram color distribution. But here in the software, you can choose to linearize the scale and how it distributes the colors. And we also have a new mode called DDE, Digital Detail Enhancement, sort of an advanced algorithm for drawing out fine details from the image. This was only in the researcher software up until very recently. We moved it into Thermal Studio. Also, in the Analyze mode, you can rotate images. Again, this is another new feature, so you can very easily rotate the thermal image, left or right, and save it, and it will retain its radiometric properties. You can adjust the fusion mode. So any of these fusion images that you have typically will default to MSX in the camera. And some cameras allow you to change modes. But regardless of what you do in the camera, you can always change the modes here in the software. And this shows you several of the different fusion modes available. So you can show thermal only, thermal fusion, blending, etc. One very nice feature is the ability to adjust the alignment. We've never really been able to do this in software, certainly not in FLIR tools. So if your overlay is a little bit off, I'll show you this once we get into the software. You can select this check mark and just easily move it up or down to fix that problem. So that's very cool. We also have a line profile, so you can put that on, enable it, and it will show up right underneath the image while you're analyzing it. Now I mentioned sequence editing. This toolbar at the bottom of the window allows you to adjust the playback of the sequence. You can save a snapshot from the sequence. It's basically just a frame out of it that's still radiometric. You can mark a portion of the sequence, and then you have the ability to save that marked portion as a new sequence. So for example, if you have a 10-minute recording, you might only be interested in 1 or 2 minutes of it. So you can mark it with these little blue marks here, and then you can basically extract that out as a new sequence that's still radiometric. Similarly, with the MPEGs, you can adjust the playback, save a snapshot. You have the same marking functions. Just remember that these are not radiometric. These are basically just color videos. But you have a lot of the same editing capabilities. And one really nice thing is that if there's embedded GPS in that video, it'll show it here in the software. And you can see the map there on the right. So it shows that kind of active map, and then it shows the coordinates, so you can bring it up in Google Maps. Okay. So if you have a GF320, for instance, you have the GPS enabled, you go out and shoot a video, you'll see that. So you can play it back, edit it, and see the map. All right. Templates and reports. You can very easily create custom templates using the Thermal Studio software. A lot of these functions, if you've used Tools Plus or any of our template editing software before, they're commonly used functions. You can insert a thermal image and a photo. You can insert tables and fields and link these up to image parameters. So you can design your own template, pick what you want to show, where you want to show it. You can add a profile on a histogram graph and a map very similar to what we just saw on the MPEG. So if your thermal image has GPS, you can put a map on the page and link up to the GPS coordinates in that image. Okay. You can create and edit text annotation templates, and you can create custom formulas. You can add front and back pages. You can very easily create reports through the UI, through Thermal Studio, and you can create a desktop shortcut. So once you have your template ready to go, you come back with some images, you can just drag them from your SD card or whatever and drop them onto the shortcut, and it will make a report for you. So it's really easy and really fast. Okay. And the batch processing. This is another kind of unique tool to Thermal Studio. We've never really had this in our software before. We could never talk about every option here in a session like this, so I'm going to give you a little bit of overview here of what you can do with it, some common things that you can do. Basically, the way this works is that you can set batch functions. So you want all your images to have a certain color palette. Okay? So you can set this up ahead of time and say, configure it for the rainbow palette, let's say. And so you can go and find a folder containing images, and you can run that batch and apply that setting to 100 images all at one time. And within a minute or so, it's done. And that's essentially how this works. And then you have a wide variety of settings here. You can set the scale. So we have a lot of SUAS customers. We've had this question in class. It's like, well, I have 200 images here. I want to set them all to use the same temperature scale and the same color palette. We've never had a real easy way to do this. Now we do. All right. You can also export radiometric images from sequences. You can export all images to CSV format. So if you wanted to actually have the text data from each image, you can do that pretty easily. You can apply overlay settings, you can apply measurement settings, object parameters, you can combine these functions. So it's obviously a powerful feature, and there's a lot of options. So if you're looking to automate any of your tasks, you might want to check that out. Okay, so that's that. Now let's look at the software. So this is the user interface, which I showed you in the PowerPoint. So you have these 4 tabs. Again, going back to the settings button, I mentioned this because it's a good thing to check before you start working with it, particularly when it comes to the regional settings and the units and these things. So all these different tabs here, if you go to regional settings, so you can pick your language, your temperature units, the overlay settings, these are all of the things that you can enable or disable about that overlay, that graphics overlay. So you have a lot of control over what's showing on top of the image. So if you wanted to remove that measurements table where it says SP1, BX1 and whatnot, you can just uncheck that and apply that change. So it's very, very easy to control that. Either for a single image, this applies to just one image where it says File Explorer. If you go to batch processing, that applies to the batch results. So if you did a batch function for a bunch of images, this tab controls what the output of that. Also the output folder. Going back to the batch functions, if you're going to start working with that, make sure you know where the output's going, because what it does is it copies the images. So it doesn't change the original images. It processes them, applies those changes, and then copies them to the folder that's shown on the output tab. And you can change this with the browse button, which is way over on the right here. So you can set that to whatever you want, but just keep that in mind if you're going to work with those functions. And then when you're done, you can close this out. All right. And we'll go over to the library tab. So this is where you can find your images, find your recordings. The left portion is basically your File Explorer. It works very, very, very similar to you're just Windows, File Explorer. So you can go to whatever drive, whatever folder you want, find the images you want to work with, and then to open an image, you just double click on it. This is just an image of a couple of cups of water, one cold and one hot. I'll just run through some of the settings on the toolbar here so you can kind of get an idea of where to find things. Your analysis toolbar is across the top. So you can select your palette here pretty easily. Okay. You can adjust your scale. So down at the bottom, if you've used FLIR tools, this will look really familiar. All right, so you can adjust your scale. You can move these brackets back and forth to widen it or narrow it. On this button, where it says Auto Adjust Control, you can enable Auto Adjust, which you can also do by double clicking on it. So let me narrow this back here. So if you wanted to auto adjust this image, you can double click anywhere in between these brackets here, and it effectively auto adjusts it. But you also have this defined rectangle, which is the second checkbox here. So if I click this, I have this floating rectangle, which FLIR Tools also has. It's kind of like a local auto adjust, so you can move that around and auto adjust different parts of the image. Okay. So you have full control over the scale adjustment. This is your color distribution, which I showed again a little bit earlier. So you can choose different distribution modes. And over here, these are your fusion modes. So right now, I have it configured for thermal only, so it's not showing any of the visual camera artifacts, just the pure thermal. But typically, when you open an image, it's going to be in the MSX mode, which applies the algorithm and combines the visual camera with the thermal. Now, I mentioned the fusion alignment. You can adjust actually the intensity of the blending here. It's called alpha in the software. You just slide this back and it kind of makes it brighter, makes those edges brighter or dimmer, depending on where that is. And you can adjust the alignment by enabling this checkbox. So this is a little bit off. So this outer ring is the edge of the cup. Okay. So I can line that up just by dragging this box. And we can line that up as best we can, like that. And then once you get it set, just click the check mark. You're good to go. Right, so now, if we toggle between the MSX and the visual camera, it's pretty well aligned now. All right, so if you run into a situation where the alignment's maybe not perfect, or maybe you just want to tweak it a little bit, it's very easy to do. It's under the Fusion menu. And just click on that check mark for adjust alignment. All right. This is where you can rotate the image. Slide that back and forth. And over here, this is where you can add your measurement functions. So the spot meter, line, rectangle, these are very common. So if you've used FLIR tools before, there's really no difference in how these work. Rectangle shows the maximum and the minimum temperature and the average temperature. To the right is where you can see all your measurement results and all your parameters. So that's, again, pretty similar to FLIR tools and how that works. If you right-click on a measurement tool, there are several options to show or hide the hot spot, the cold spot, etc. All right, and you can also remove the tool, but you can also duplicate a tool. So this is kind of a cool feature. So if you wanted to have 2 or 3 areas or 2 or 3 ellipses that are the same exact size, what you can do is right-click and go to Create Duplicate. And it will copy that area and make an exact duplicate. The polygon I mentioned earlier is a custom area, custom shape, so you can trace whatever odd shape you have. Right-click at the end, and there you go. And again, functionally, it's an area tool. So from a measurement standpoint, it works the same as a rectangle or an ellipse. All right. Now the magic wand, it's kind of like an auto area tool, if you want to call it that. So basically, if I click anywhere in this region, it'll automatically select temperatures that are within a certain tolerance level that is selectable over here. So you can adjust that. If you move it to the right, it'll expand that a little bit. If you move it to the left, it kind of narrows it down. So depending on the image, it really depends on what you're imaging, you know, as to how well this works. But an image like this, where there's a well-defined difference in temperature between the hot water and the cooler cup, it works pretty well. All right, so that was just you know, a little bit about the measurement functions. Again, if you're looking for any of your measurement tools, they're on this toolbar. You have your palette, you have all your other selections up here across the top. So let me close that. And I want to talk a little bit about reporting. This tab is where you can create your reports and create new templates. If you want to create a new template, what you would do is start on the New button, the upper left, and go to Create a New Reporting Template. This is where you can build your new template. Now, one thing to keep in mind as you're doing this, these panels on the left and the right are important if you want to show pages and add and delete pages. You can close them, and that's what this X does. But this happened to me. All right, so I closed the panel and I forgot that I closed it, and I wasn't quite sure how to enable it. So if this happens to you, right-click on the gray area here, and that allows you to enable those panels. So if you're missing this panel on the left or this panel on the right, right-click on the gray area, click the check mark, and that will enable it for you. And you have to click on the gray area, not on the page. So just remember that. Right-click over here. That'll give you those panels. And the reason I mention that is because I'm going to, a little bit later, add a cover page. In order to do that, you have to have this panel selected. So, but I'm going to start with the data page, the IR page. Again, these are all your template building tools across the top here. I can add a thermal image and add a photo from here. And you can just drag them and drop them wherever you like. It's not like Word where you have to put them in line with text or anything. You can just sort of position them where you want. The table functions are right in this group. So we have a list of predefined tables that group values based on certain categories. So if you wanted to show measurements, for instance, you can go down to that category. You can select that and then position the table wherever we like. And so this will automatically change depending on which measurement functions you have on the image. By default, it will show everything. But if we look to the right on that panel, you can disable certain functions. So you might want to just show, say, spots, delta T's, and rectangles. And you can uncheck those other tools. And then it will do just that. If you have 3 spots in the image, you'll get 3 rows in the table. And there are others like, you have parameters, you have text annotations. So if your image has some text, you can add a table for that. And then whatever's in the image will show in this table. If it doesn't have anything, it will just leave it blank. You can also add an empty table or a custom table if you wanted to combine different items into one table. So the empty table you have to configure kind of row by row. So the first thing you want to do is add it to the page. And now to select the items that you want to show, just right-click, go to Add Row, and then these are all the image parameters that you can show in the table. So I can go to Created, for instance, which will show the date that the image was saved or created in the camera. We can add parameters, say emissivity, maybe reflected temperature, and so on. So you can really customize the tables this way, but you have to configure them row by row, whereas the predefined, it's kind of automatic as far as how they work. All right. You can also delete rows. So it's basically all in the right-click menu. So any of the settings to add, remove rows, it's all under the right-click menu. So this is Add Row, Remove Table. Okay. So that's the predefined, or the measurements and the annotations in this example. Empty table is right below it. The fields over here are individual items. So these are, if you just wanted to show the file name in one spot or the emissivity in another spot, not have it bound to a table, that's what all the fields do. So it's the same information, it's separate from a table. It's pretty common to have a comments box of some sort on the page. So because here you can't just type onto the page, it's not like Word, right? So if you want to have any extra text, you can build a text box in. That's right here in the field group. So you can size that accordingly. Maybe put extra comments here, like that. And just to finish this up real quick, you can add graphs. I mentioned earlier the profile, the histogram. You can place these on the page. You can also place a GPS map, which you can put anywhere, and it will look like the like what we saw in the video. So it'll show a map with the coordinates. You can also add the coordinates to the tables. Okay. So within a couple minutes, we built up a pretty decent IR page, right? Now, cover page is pretty common. That's where you need this panel. Down at the bottom, you have Add and Remove. So I need to add a page. Then we can right-click, move that up. So now it's in the front. And cover page is typically a text box with a logo on it, maybe some extra information. So we'll just do something real quick. Probably want to increase the font a little. So that's why these panels are important, because there are some settings that you need to be able to access over on the right. So widen that. So all the text functions for this are all over here. The alignment. There we go. So you can add a logo too, which is pretty common if you want to put your company logo on the page. That's done in this group where you inserted the thermal in the photo. There's something called shared image. Under there, there is an insert logo function. And then on the right is where you can pick the logo. So this just puts in the placeholder. Over here is where you actually pick what you want to use for that logo image. Okay, so there we go. So you can have multiple front pages. You can put a summary table. That's also built into the table group, summary table. That works the same as it did in Tools Plus and some of our other software. So you can have back pages. So it's just a matter of adding them over on the right-hand side and then arranging them on the right-click menu. Move up, move down, set it up the way you like. And then in order to use it, we just have to save it. So we go to Save As, Save as Template. Get a name. And now we can go back. So now I have my template. It's the one I just created. And there's a couple different ways you can create the report. I'm just going to I'll show you this and then the drag and drop method, because the drag and drop is pretty cool. From here, if you want to create a new report, you can right click and go to select, or actually double click. There we go. You can double click on it. That's probably the easiest way. And so it's kind of like a wizard. So if you double click the template, the next step is to pick the images you want to use. So there's some logic to it, and you can just use the shift key or control key or whatever you like to pick the images you want to use. We drag them over. And then it adds the cover page first, and then adds all of those other pages. Auto associates the photo, which is pretty common with our other software. Go to the next step. Now you have a report. So it's pretty quick. Shows all your files on the left. This is kind of like a shortcut to your image library. All your pages are here, so you can jump to any one of these pages. You can still right-click, move up and move down, so you can rearrange them. And the images are editable through the double-click menu. So I can go to any one of these and double-click, and it brings up the image editor. So it's identical to what we did earlier from the library. You can still edit it in the report and adjust all your settings, and then just save it and close it and update that image in the report. So that's method one to create the report. If you want to use the drag and drop method, we can go back again to that initial step. So we have to go back a few steps. I can right click and create a rapid report shortcut. Okay, so just click here. We move this, a new shortcut on the desktop. So now instead of going into Thermal Studio, I can go to my folder and I can select all my images. And just drag them from here, drop them onto here, and it makes a new report. Okay. So once you get your template set the way you want, it makes it really easy to get into kind of a rhythm of creating these reports. Or you come back from your job, open that folder, drop them onto the shortcut. You know, you can arrange your pages and do all your analysis if you want right inside that report. So that's a really cool feature.
Yeah.
So there's some nice things in this, some things that we don't have in FLIR tools, and some things that we've really never had in our advanced software, like the fusion alignment and certainly the batch processing. I don't know if we'll have time for the batch today.
Coming up on 2020 of. Got a lot of questions that came in too.
Okay.
So I guess, you know, you and I have talked offline about this.
Yep.
There's a lot in this program, obviously.
There is.
So we're going to be, I think, revisiting this as several different subtopics, right? Was that the plan?
Yeah, I think what we'll do, this is kind of just as a general overview. That was kind of my approach here, because there is a lot to this. So I think probably what we'll do in the future is do a reporting webinar where we can spend a little more time on the templates, and we can build a couple different types of templates, and maybe one on like batch processing and video editing or something like that.
Definitely, that sounds good.
And that way we can spend more time on it. So this is more of just, here's an idea of what you can do, so you can explore the settings and kind of know where you can start. And I think we'll plan on doing that.
Okay.
More focused sessions. So, but where it's a new software and we've been getting questions on it, like what is this? It's like, that's kind of my approach here, was just to say, well, this is what it is, and some of what it can do, and some of the unique features.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got, I'd probably say, half a dozen or so questions that have come in here. Do you want to take those now, or did you have something else to wrap?
I can run through the batch real quick just to show you how it works.
Yeah,
we'll
a
just
couple
do a
people
real
are asking about that.
simple.
Let's do that.
We'll do a real simple batch process. I mentioned the SUAS customers earlier because we do get that question in class a lot about kind of setting a scale, say, for all your images. We can do that pretty easily. All of these buttons, there's a lot that you can do here. But typically what you want for an output target, in this case, what I want is a radiometric image. So I want it to make the changes and copy out and output a radiometric version with those changes. So that you need to have. You can have other outputs, like for instance, if you have AVI, it's going to kind of compress, or not compress, but copy your images into a movie. So it's just a different output format, right? So you can kind of experiment with some of those others. But with regards to the scale, I have the output format. If we scroll down a little bit, I can set a scale minimum and a scale maximum. So for the minimum, it all depends on, you have to decide what the minimum is that you want, obviously. So I'll do 0 and say 70C, something like that. So it's going to apply those scale settings to all those images that you select. Also want to apply a color palette, which is right up here. So we'll apply the rainbow palette. Right. So that configures the batch job, and you can save these and reuse them. So if it's a batch job you use often, you can save it. In this case, I have it set up the way I want. I'm going to go to Next, down in the lower right. Now, the next step is to add the images that you want to batch. So actually, let me delete these so we can see how to go about adding them. A simple way, if they're all in one folder, a simple way to add them is to just take the folder and drag it from over here over to the right. So you take the folder from the left-hand side and just drag it, and it just takes everything in that folder. If not, you can select individual images from that middle window. Okay. So now I've got the images added to the batch job. So now the next step is to start processing. And it'll start applying those changes to all those images. You can kind of see it on the preview. So they're all using the rainbow palette. They're all using that scale that I picked. And it's going to do 42 images in probably 30 seconds or so. We'll see. And these are still radiometric, but you have the option, from earlier, you have the option to output it in different formats. But with being radiometric, I can still bring them up in the software and
Yeah.
still process them. And remember, it puts them in the output folder, whoops, which actually had automatically opened for us. So there you go. So now you have all those images, which we can just scroll through here in the picture viewer, but you can see 0 to 70, 0 to 70, right? So
Nice.
it's a nice feature. And again, the output folder is where it's going to put them. So just remember to set that, or at least note where that is from here. So, okay. All right.
We're going to roll into questions.
Yep.
Before we do that, though, I actually had one that just came in from Steve regarding support, and he was asking about changing registrations from one computer to another, and I had responded with the FLIR support website.
Yeah.
Did you want to show that before we went to questions?
I did.
So Jason will tackle that, and then we'll take your questions here right after that.
We actually have a link to the support site in the software, which is really handy. So on the Home tab, if you have any support questions, you can click on this link and it will launch the support, the customer support website. We have a link to the training center too. And the license button is where you can activate your licenses and deactivate. So I think if you want to switch PCs, you would want to deactivate it on your PC that you're on, and then you can activate it on the other. If you have any questions about that, it's best to check with support. I do have a quick PowerPoint on that. So this is the website. So it's just support.flir.com. We've been using this for years. It's kind of our home page for all our support services, our downloads, documentation, camera manuals, and whatever. So there's a lot of stuff on here. But you can ask a question through that button that the arrow's pointing at right here. So you have to log in. You have to create an account first. But once that's done, you can submit a question. It's a global system, so it'll go to your regional office, and they'll be able to help you. Matt kind of mentioned this earlier. This is our on-demand resources where you can find any on-demand training that we have. We have several operator courses, camera operator courses, software courses on the irtraining.com. We also have a YouTube channel with a lot of information. And I think that was it.
And we'll mention some of the other social media outlets also.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Edgar was wondering about Ultramax images. Will they can they work in FLIR Studio?
Yep. In fact, there is a batch. Let me go back here. The way the Ultramax works is that it has to be kind of up-converted by the software, which FLIR tools can do. But with this, there's a batch function for it, which is in this image group. So if you create a batch called Ultramax, there's really not much else you need to do there. So you can just be a single batch. We can delete. Let me just delete those others just to remove the confusion here. So you can do an Ultramax batch, outputs radiometric, and then it will up-convert all those images for you. So yep, you can definitely do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Right. No problem.
I think we'll wrap it up. A question we got, we've recorded today's session. We'll have a rough cut of this presentation pushed out to you in a little bit here later today. That's for those that have registered and are on with us. Then in the coming weeks, we'll post the final version to our website at infraredtraining.com/webinars. Also, be sure to follow us on social media for the latest news, helpful tips, special training announcements, and more. You can find us at Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And don't forget about the post-webinar Q&A session planned for tomorrow. It's going to be on Facebook and YouTube at 9 a.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. And of course, if we missed a question, you can certainly ask it then. And then general information for our training, infraredtraining.com for the latest schedule for the US and Canada. And for our fellow thermographers in Europe, the Middle East, or Africa, irtraining.eu is where you'll find a list of courses in your region. All right, thank you, Jason. And thank you, everybody, for watching here today. Hope you enjoyed today's session, and we'll see you online again soon. Till then, have a great day.